Today on Tricro Studios, we do a high gain amp shootout between the Peavey Valve King VK100, I think this is considered the Mark 1, and the Peavey 6505 Plus. So I'd like to reiterate here that this is a high gain amp shootout, so you're not going to hear any cleans, you're not going to hear any breakups, or any soft or smooth jazz. This is just high gain geared towards metal. But I do have two sound samples for you today, the first of which is in drop C, and that's a more somewhat balanced EQ setting, and the second of which is a more scooped setting in drop B. All right, so there you go. There's the two sound samples for the high gain amp shootout between the Peavey Valve King VK100. I believe, again, this is considered the Mark I, and the Peavey 6505 Plus. People usually ask what version of that is. I just call it the Made in USA version. It was changed over to China in more recent years. I don't think there's any real differences in components or anything, just where it's made. And then it's continued to be made in China for the 6505 too. So at this point in the video, I like to go over kind of what I've gained from doing a shootout like this. And I do have to make a tiny little comment here because I have been threatened not to make any more high gain videos about the Valve King 100. Basically, a lot of people consider it like this secret unknown amp where it gets a lot of great tones out of it, and people don't know what to do with it, so they sell it for very, very cheap. So yeah, I'm just making more of them, and it's when I say threats, it's funny threats like, hey, don't do that kind of a deal. So what I figured I was going to get was a little less clarity and definition in the Valve King, a little more clarity and definition in the 6505 Plus, but a lot more high end and high mids, where this has a lot more low end and just mids in general. So I did really feel that that did come across here in the shootout. I do think that like anytime I play the Valve King, I'm always surprised and a little let down at the same point. It's a great amp, and it doesn't have the issues that something like the Blue Voodoo, the Crate Blue Voodoo has, where it has to be at certain settings in order to actually sound good, otherwise it sounds boxy. However, it does come across as a little dry, so not as lively as it could be. So a lot of people may think, because it does have a lot more high-end emphasis than the 6505 Plus, so going back and forth, a lot of people may actually favor the Valve King 100, but in something more like a live setting, or if you have a picky guitarist, it can be picky, in a recording setting as well, they may not want to use the Valve King. They may actually shy away from it. The 6505 Plus is one of those amps in a live setting where that's really where it thrives. There's a lot of cut and stuff like that with it. Whereas the Valve King 100 wouldn't sound as favorable with bringing up the mids as you would with the 6505 Plus. And no, I'm not using any type of boost with the Valve King. This is just the Valve King on its own. And I would also like to mention both of these are Peavey amps. That seems obvious, but one thing that I do want to bring across, and anytime I do a video with the Peavey amps, when you're using a Peavey amp, when you own a Peavey amp, the potentiometers that they use, I don't know why this happens, but we'll just say they're of a different quality. But they tend to get a little dirtier, or a lot more dirtier than most other potentiometers from other amps that I've used. So what I like to say is expect every like 1.5 to 2 years to actually pull the chassis out, get some contact cleaner, spray that in every single one of the potentiometers, and work that in to clean out the pots. Because what can end up happening, I know there's been a couple of people like, you know, I've owned Peavey amps for years, and this has never happened. But it's a known issue. It's well known. And out of the 5 Peavey amps that I do own, I've had to do this to 4. 6505 Plus, I haven't yet. But what ends up happening is you can get like crackly pots, but what's more than likely to happen is you can actually get dead spots on your pots. So like say you think you need a little more gain or a little more volume, and you kind of move it just a tiny bit, and then it either cuts out, or it takes away a lot of the gain, or it just has no signal at all. It takes a half hour really to pull out the chassis, spray everything, and then work it in. And contact cleaner is not expensive. It's something you can do on your own. You just have to be a little careful, and you have to be a little mindful of what you're touching inside the amp. But anyway, that's all I really want to say about this iGain amp shootout. I consider myself very lucky to own both of these amps. They're both great choices. And if you see a Valve King 100 on the used market, buy some contact cleaner, pick it up if it's a good price, and you know what? It can be a great second amp. Thanks for watching.